So just before the video starts, I wanted to give a quick shout out to what is quite possibly the most apt sponsorship I've ever come across for Vivec. Oftentimes I'll decline, well, 99.9% of sponsorship deals I come across because I just don't think Raid Shadow Legends is very appropriate for the sort of content on this channel. But I know a lot of you like to fall asleep to these report videos, and that's why I thought these COZYSNUG sleep earbuds from LYTMI really are a match made in heaven for this channel and its viewers. If you're anything like me, you might struggle falling to sleep on your back with conventional earbuds in. I'd always wondered whether there were any designs that facilitated side sleeping without waking up with a perforated eardrum. Not only do these earbuds work wonders for side sleepers, they boast high quality audio, are super lightweight and soft with various different sizes of ear wings to pick and choose from, on top of having 21 hours of charge when using the charging case. So, now you can all quickly and smoothly fall asleep listening to me recount the usual litany of mind-bending, reality-shattering experiences that we all know and love. If you're interested, please check out the link in the description, and don't forget to use the discount code Vivec for 10% off your order, valid up until the 9th of December. Anyway, we'll crack on with the video now, but be sure to let me know what you thought of the earbuds if you do end up snatching yourself a pair, and thank you to LYTMI for reaching out, I really appreciate it. Talking Pillows. A Brugmansia trip report by Psychonaut420, posted to earwood.org May 5th, 2006. After previous experiences with similar anticholinergic deliriants like Benadryl, Dramamine and DXM combined with Dramamine, I stupidly dove headfirst into an irresponsible, impulsive and almost fatal experience with the ancient and long-respected delirium, Brugmansia, or Tree Datura. In late 2003 I moved to Fort Lauderdale from NJ for about a year. When I first moved into the apartment I met someone who knew of several belladonna trees growing around the nearby neighbourhoods. Several times when we were bored, we used to take long hikes all over the area trying to find this plant, never with any success. It wasn't uncommon for us to walk 3 hours or longer during our hikes. After about a month of this we gave up, assuming that the trees were dug up and no longer around, even though there is a major road in the area called Datura Street. Later on that year I met S, and randomly asked upon meeting her if she had seen or knew where there was Datura growing in the area. S grew up in the area and was overall familiar with the neighbourhoods. Without skipping a beat, S replied with an exact location of an angel trumpet tree growing in front of a small church. Ecstatic, I told her to take a walk with me and show me where this plant was, remembering how much time me and my other friend wasted walking around Fort Lauderdale aimlessly trying to find this strangely compelling plant. I was broke, bored, and tired of sitting in my stifling apartment with no air or electricity. So me, S, and Loser, who was currently staying at my apartment, took a hike to find this elusive tree. Times were rough then, and I was about to be evicted from my apartment, thanks to a former roommate, best friend, or dickhead, who stole a shitload of rent money from me to support his own heroin addiction, and Loser, who I let stay with me, had no job. Ultimately, I was not in a good state of mind, and had no business taking an extremely powerful and potentially deadly delirium plant. I really was dangerously impulsive, and I could have easily killed myself that night. The three of us finally approached the church, and sure enough, there was this massive tree standing strong, embracing the church, clutching it even, almost like it had been guarding the church for years, despite its age-old association with the devil. For years I've been into psychedelics and I usually don't approach an opportunity like this so irresponsibly, but being as depressed as I was, but yet almost mesmerised and overjoyed to find this plant growing only a couple of blocks away from my apartment, I ran up to the tree and filled a couple of shopping bags with plant material. I madly shoved handfuls of leaves and flowers into my mouth, munching on the bitter hallucinogenic salad, knowing that I could possibly die that night. I don't know what I was thinking, because honestly I knew in the back of my head that this was going to be just like all of those awful experiences with Dramamine and Benadryl, but some weird unconscious drive to self-destruction just came into play during the moment. Somehow seeing the actual plant right in front of me with its alluring radiance, peculiar smell, and an aura of forbidden knowledge gave me a feeling like it would be different in some way. It was as though I was temporarily blinded of my familiarity with the reports online about natural tropine alkaloids, as they were usually described to be more out of control, sinister and unnerving than experiences written about the over-the-counter drugs like Dramamine that mimic some of the familiar effects produced by belladonna and datura. It was late at night, and after we filled up a few shopping bags with flowers and leaves, we power-walked back to the apartment complex. Broward County pigs tend to stop and search people randomly for no reason at night time, so they can put them in jail and get money for arresting someone. We made it a point to get back as soon as possible. I did not want to be caught with bags full of suspicious leaves, and have to spend a night in a prison tripping on datura. Familiar with how tropine alkaloids act on the body, I wasn't sure if I was going to make it back standing upright. Nothing too amazing happened on the walk home though. I don't remember this, but S told me that when we got close to the apartment, Loser pointed at a cactus and yelled, "Oh look, it's San Pedro cactus." And as a reflex, I reached out and grabbed the cactus, then let go realizing my hand was full of cactus needles, and it wasn't San Pedro at all. I know towards the end of the journey back home I started becoming really wobbly and had trouble walking straight. The body high was very similar to being drunk with no physical discomfort just yet. I remember during this period, the buzz was actually quite pleasant. After a while, the hot, stale summer night air started feeling like fluid sliding over me as I walked. Instead of going into my apartment, me, S, and Loser went to the pool area and swam for a while. It was around this time I had noticed I was starting to feel the effects getting ready to come on strong. My dizziness started feeling like it was about to lift off. The adrenaline and anxiety seemed to be gradually increasing as my heart pumped the now intoxicating blood through my veins. I started feeling less and less comfortable and safe to being outside and in the pool. It was about an hour after that I ate the plants by then. At that time, I suggested to Loser to come inside the apartment. He had eaten a fair amount also, so I advised him to head inside and lay down, because I knew it was going to hit both of us very soon. Once again, I clarify the apartment had no air conditioning or electricity anymore because of my former roommate Dickhead taking all that money from me. So the inside of the apartment was truly brutal. The air was hot, stagnant, and 2 of the 3 couches were leather, so when you lay down on them it sticks to your skin. Needless to say, the surroundings were very uncomfortable, not to mention we had no lights except for a few candles. Not a suitable setting for tripping. I did not want to be caught outside acting stupid in front of any one of my neighbours or have Loser be arrested or tied up, talking to the hallucinations that may manifest to him in the parking lot. Sometime between the time I decided to walk from the pool to the apartment, I found myself laying flat on the ground halfway outside, with only my head and arms in the apartment, talking to Dickhead's aunt from NJ. It was at this point that the femme fatale has succeeded in knocking me on my ass, straight into an imaginary realm, where nothing is what it seems. Apparently I got up the steps when all of a sudden the force of the vertigo hit me like a shot of heroin, disabling me and making me think I was in NJ. I'm pretty sure 1 or 2 of my other friends came over at that time. To this day I haven't fully figured out who was there and who wasn't. I blacked out several times during the peak, and my memory from this point is very choppy. Off and on, all night long, I found myself on the floor or leaning over the back of the daybed, in the front room with everyone, either smoking a non-existent cigarette or having slurred, senseless conversations with friends back in Jersey on my cell phone, only to realise that I wasn't holding anything at all. This was when the effects of the Brugmansia had taken full force on my body. Despite my endless conversations with imaginary people, I had lost control of my tongue, so when I spoke it was like I had overdosed on that anti-anxiety medication, Haldol. Although it was nowhere near as bad as a Haldol overdose, it was still almost impossible to communicate with the real world, and I felt like I had Down syndrome. At points I had to force myself up against the nauseating gravity that had my body held in a lying position, to take a trip to the bathroom. This was always annoying, because I had to pee, what seemed like every other minute to be honest. This was very physically challenging for a reality-challenged individual. Every time I had to get up, I could feel the weight of gravity trying to push me back in place. It was a fight against vertigo, and the effects of the plant were kicking my ass. These feelings of extreme vertigo always reminded me of times when I was a kid, when I would try to stick my head or arms out against the force of gravity when I rode the Gravitron on the boardwalk. When I got up on my feet, I would wobble around for the first few steps until I could finally grab onto a wall or something and shuffle my way to the bathroom. Once I got into the bathroom, immediately I noticed the repulsive stench of the dark room. The humidity from the shower area mixed with the heat and the foul moisture evaporating from the toilet area, and overall feeling of nastiness, cottonmouth, and the lack of control of my body made these walks very, very unpleasant. I often had to crouch over the toilet because for some reason it was like my prostate was swollen or something, and it was a real effort just to relieve myself, despite how badly I had to go. Every time I would leave the main room to go to the bathroom, I would have some of the most confusing, full-blown auditory and visual hallucinations. At times, I wasn't aware that these were hallucinations, unless it was too bizarre to be possible. But even then, I sometimes fell for it, thinking that it was real. The only way to distinguish what's real and what isn't is to touch it. If my hand goes through it, or it moves back as I reach for it, then it's not real. I noticed that sometimes these hallucinations actually cover real things so that I can't see them. Like one time, I tried to reach for the doorknob to get out of a room, and I'd reach for a fake one underneath the real one that would be covered by a dark spot. This started a very annoying cycle of events that took me until the middle of the following day to get out of. One of the times I had to go to the bathroom, I remember I had to relight one of the candles. Immediately after I relit the candle, I slide back down to the floor next to the toilet from the sickening and nauseating force of gravity. While I struggled to relieve myself, wobbling back and forth, kneeling, pants down next to the toilet, Loser and S came in and started talking to me. This seemed really weird, considering I was half naked and in the process of peeing, but whatever they were saying to me seemed real and coherent enough that I continued talking to them for about 15 minutes. This is a perfect example of an eerily familiar dream logic that often supported my psychotic behaviour at the time. As I started to stand upright and pull my pants up, a black cat ran from the hallway into the bathroom. It jumped over my feet and into the shower. I remember telling them what I just saw, and both of them started laughing at me and told me I was crazy and just hallucinating. Turns out, both of them were hallucinations. After the fake S and Loser left the room, I remember seeing a shadowy glass of water by the sink. Somehow, I thought that I might have left it in the bathroom earlier to relieve my cottonmouth at the time. I grabbed the glass of water, was about to drink it, but as soon as the water hit my tongue, I realised that I had grabbed a plastic bottle of isopropyl alcohol. My mouth was on fire, and I put my mouth to the sink and tried to flush the toxic, fiery taste out of my mouth. I stumbled back into the other room, collapsed onto the leather couch into S's lap, and snuggled into her body, mumbling absolute nonsense, and blacked out for the rest of the night. I woke up still tripping, and stumbled to the bedroom, seeing Dickhead snoring loudly in my bed. It was morning and everything was bright, and took on a dirty yellowish pea colour. My pupils were still completely dilated, and the light hurt my eyes. The large 290-pound guy who was sleeping on my bed seemed too real to be a hallucination. I even went and leaned over the bed, right by his face to see if he was real. I could feel his breath blowing in my face as he snored very, very loudly. Something about the way his chest moved in and out as he breathed seemed like it faded into the next position, almost like a movement trail from acid. It was almost opaque, with a fluid-like pattern moving over his body like how the walls had looked the night before made this seem a little suspicious. I walked around the bed to check again. Dickhead no longer stayed at my apartment, and even though we were not really speaking at the time, it wasn't uncommon for him to hang out at my apartment when other people were around, since we did share some of the same group of friends. Something told me it still didn't make any sense that he would be sleeping on my bed though. I wasn't even sure that I'd remembered seeing him there at all that night. I left the room still baffled and confused, yet again passing out and blacking out for an hour or so. Loser had left, supposedly to go to the library and look for jobs, and S walked out of the bedroom and came into the kitchen to get a drink of water, then passed out in the front room by me on one of the couches. At one point I asked her why Dickhead was sleeping in my bed and what he was even doing in my apartment. S told me he wasn't at the apartment at any time during the night, and she was the one sleeping in my bed. S is 16, medium height, skinny, and does not resemble Dickhead in any way, shape, or form. After Loser left, S decided to go to the library as well. She was very concerned for me and asked me if I would be okay to be alone in the apartment. At some point in that morning after Loser left, she told me that for about 6 minutes, I was walking in circles in the bedroom with my hands clenched in my hair, yelling repeatedly, "Make it stop! Make it stop! Make it stop!" I told her I'd be okay, and it would probably be best for me to be by myself, while I ride out the tail end of this nasty trip. I was alone in the house, and I told myself that from this point on, if I see or talk to anyone, it couldn't possibly be real. So it was obviously a hallucination. I even chain-locked the front door to further prove this theory. Well, the hallucinations continued to proceed through the morning, and like always, despite my attempts to stay in reality, the dream logic always made holes in my lucidity throughout the trip. For the rest of that morning, I found myself falling constantly into a frustrating and annoying thought loop. Typically, almost every 15 to 20 minutes, I would hear the door slam open and hear Loser yell from the other room, Matt, are you home? I'm back. I would come into the front room and see him standing in front of the door. As I continued talking to him, his voice would fade out until only his lips would be moving, with no sound coming out. Then, gradually, he would slowly fade into the background and dissipate. At this point, I started becoming coherent enough that this repetitive illusion started becoming more and more disturbing and annoying. I could speak clearly now without my tongue getting in the way, but I was not completely coherent. My sentences were often choppy. I stuttered a lot when I spoke. Yet another clockwise disturbance that came about every 10 to 15 minutes was that I would be holding the cell phone talking to a friend in NJ while I laid on my bed, and every time I noticed I had no cell phone in my hand, but yet I would still hear my friend's gargled voice continuing to talk. For some reason, again the dream logic, I would always respond back and tell her, "I'm sorry, but you're not real, and I do have to go now. Goodbye." Then the voice would stop. After that, I would think I was talking to S, who would be sitting next to me on the bed, and she would vaporize as soon as I looked over at her or touched her. These 3 hallucinations continued for a few hours until the real S came back. Other common hallucinations consisted of bugs crawling single-lined on the walls, weird sounds echoing from the other room, or gargled alien conversations directly coming from my head. Occasionally I would think I was somewhere in New Jersey, talking to someone when I had my eyes closed, or I would see one of my friends standing in the corner of the room silently mouthing words and vaporizing after only a few seconds. The most bizarre, and probably one of the last major hallucinations that occurred that morning, was also in my bedroom on the bed opposite of me. Sitting on the bed, I had a Dawn of the Dead pillow and a Freddy Krueger pillow. Well, for some reason at some point I had a whole conversation with these pillows. S's voice came out of the Dawn of the Dead pillow, and Loser's voice came out of the Freddy Krueger one. I talked back and forth with them for a minute or so, until I realised I was talking to a bunch of pillows and that no one was actually there. I asked these pillow entities if they were archons from different dimensions, and if they could talk to me about themselves. As soon as I asked them those questions, they assumed their normal inanimate position, stopping talking to me. This is crazy. "I'm actually talking to a bunch of pillows," I politely said. "You aren't responding, so, to be honest, I'm sorry, but I can't talk to you anymore. This isn't a one-way conversation. Goodbye." After this, the hallucinations started to fade, and I eventually fell into a weird, easily disturbed twilight sleep. I did not feel normal for the rest of the day, and my pupils remained dilated for a couple of days afterwards. I stayed inside during the daytime because any time I tried to open the door to go outside, all I would see is white and was basically blinded by the sun. Overall, I don't think I will ever ever repeat this experience. I went back and filled my refrigerator full of leaves and pink trumpets a few days later and tripped again on a much lower dose. The trip was nowhere near as visual as the first, and much more uncomfortable, despite no hallucinations. This time, the physical effects dominated the trip, and the entire time I felt like I was going to die. Personally, I consider an experience of Datura as postgraduate work for psychonauts, as Jim DeCorn once wrote. I can't say I regret this experience by any means because of the profound and sometimes amazing things this plant has shown me, but I doubt I will ever do it again. Experiencing the effects of this plant is no joke whatsoever, and as Carlos Castaneda once wrote, to tame the devil's weed into an ally is one of the most difficult tasks I know. That was perhaps the most in-depth and disturbing Brugmansia trip report I've ever read personally. So, Brugmansia can be sort of lumped in with Datura and other plants that have tropane alkaloids in them, which is what produces the deliriant effects. According to Psychonaut Wiki, Brugmansia, also known as Angel's Trumpet, Misha, or Tree Datura, is a genus of 7 species of poisonous flowering plants belonging to the family Solanaceae. It is a popular ornamental plant, closely related to the Datura genus of the same family. The deliriant effects are primarily induced by the anticholinergic tropane alkaloids scopolamine, isocyanine, and atropine. Decoctions and physical application of various plant parts have traditionally been used by indigenous tribes to treat a wide variety of health conditions. Recreational use in the context of shamanic rituals was common in ancient cultures. While often found as an ornamental plant, all Brugmansia varieties are considered extinct in the wild. Brugmansia is highly unpredictable, and its use is strongly linked to psychosis, severe injury, and death. So, in a nutshell, do not be taking Brugmansia or Datura or any of these deliriants. It's endlessly fascinating for me to read about deliriant trip reports on EARBUDS and noticing some of the related themes that run throughout the thought process of the people wanting to take them. And it often is just desperation to get high. Oftentimes the drug users beforehand, or the psychonauts that want to really test the boundaries of their consciousness. And while the guy at the end of this report said that he doesn't regret the experience in a sense that it did give him some profound insights into consciousness, he would never do it again because why would you want to put yourself through such a hellish experience that not only can lead to severe PTSD, it can also lead to your own death. As much as it's beautiful and fascinating to expand your mind via substances of any kind, plant-based, synthetic, anything, there is a distinction to be drawn between stuff like deliriant, Brugmansia, Datura, Benadryl, etc., with the classical psychedelics. I mean, it's not really a stretch to say that the safety net of traditional psychedelics is much better than the lack of a safety net in deliriants. It's just not worth it. It really isn't. If you're thinking about doing this, you need to take a very, very long, hard look in the mirror and really just get your priorities straight, in my opinion. Here's some more information from Wikipedia regarding the extinction of Brugmansia, which I did not know. I found that quite interesting. All 7 species are known only in cultivation or as escapees from cultivation, and no wild plants have ever been confirmed. They are therefore listed as extinct in the wild by the IUCN Red List, although they are popular ornamental plants and still exist wild outside their native range as introduced species. It is suspected that their extinction in the wild is due to the extinction of some animal which previously dispersed the seeds, with human cultivation having ensured the genus's continued survival. And that is something I did not know. See, even I'm learning stuff when I do these videos. I find it absolutely fascinating. Here's an interesting little part of the Wikipedia article: historical uses. Brugmansia are most often grown today as flowering ornamental plants. Brugmansia contains delirium hallucinogenic tropane alkaloids, which we covered before, which cause delirium and hallucinations. Delirium, for those of you that don't really know the exact definition, is a specific state of acute confusion attributable to the direct physiological consequence of a medical condition, effects of a psychoactive substance, or multiple causes, which usually develops over the course of hours to days. What's fascinating about being in a delirious state, especially that's induced by psychoactive substances, is the nullification of the frame of reference for you being on some form of substance that's induced this experience. Even in this trip report that we've just read here, like the amount of times he tried to anchor himself to reality, tried to really ground himself in the fact that there was nobody there when everybody left, when everyone physically left, he tried to really ground himself back into the physical world, and to prevent the dream world, the delirious hallucinations from interfering with his idea of what was going on. Yet even with him padding up the door and etc., he still ended up falling into the trap of believing the delirious effects that were happening to him, because they're just so real. They appear as real as anything, other than the fact that after a while they'll vaporize after you touch them, and whilst they're not always perpetual, they're like transient. In the moment, you fully believe it. It's fascinating. In modern medicine, these tropane alkaloids found in Brugmansia and other related members of Solanaceae have proven medical value for their spasmolytic, anti-asthmatic, anticholinergic, narcotic, and anesthetic properties, although many of these alkaloids or their equivalents are now artificially synthesized. Brugmansia species have also traditionally been used in many South American indigenous cultures in medical preparations as an entheogen in religious and spiritual ceremonies. Medicinally, they have most often been used externally as part of a poultice, tincture, ointment, or where the leaves are directly applied transdermally to the skin. Traditional external uses have included the treating of aches and pains, dermatitis, orchitis, arthritis, rheumatism, headaches, infections, and as an anti-inflammatory. They have been used internally, much more rarely due to the inherent dangers of ingestion. Internal uses, in highly diluted preparations, and often as a portion of a larger mix, have included treatments for stomach and muscle ailments, as a decongestant, to induce vomiting, to expel worms and parasites, and as a sedative. Several South American cultures have used Brugmansia species as a treatment for unruly children, so that they might be admonished directly by their ancestors in the spirit world, and thereby become more compliant. Bloody hell, that is an extreme way to get your child to start behaving. Like back in Victorian times, or maybe even like the 20th century. And even today, you spank your kid, try to get him to behave, which oftentimes doesn't work because you're just going to make the kid even angrier. But in certain South American cultures, they knock a bit of Brugmansia down the neck and hope that it sorts them out. So that's pretty crazy. Mixed with maize beer and tobacco leaves, it has been used to drug wives and slaves before they were buried alive with their dead lord. This is fascinating stuff here. I'm learning quite a lot about this particularly bizarre plant and the cultural background surrounding it. In the northern Peruvian Andes, shamans, curanderos or suranderos, traditionally use Brugmansia species for initiation, divination, and black magic rituals. Now that's something I do not doubt at all. The black magic potential with these deliriant substances, the datura, the belladonna, etc. I do not doubt it whatsoever. In some Latin countries such as Colombia and Peru, members of the genus Brugmansia are reportedly used by malevolent sorcerers or bad shamans in some ayahuasca brews in an attempt to take advantage of tourists. Now this is something I have heard about before, and actually at Rosa Festival I was talking to Amber from the Sensory Sanctuary, who's a really amazing woman. She's super informed about just spirituality in all forms, whether it's through psychedelics, through transcendental meditation, and just all of the forms of spirituality. Fascinating person. I love talking to her. And she told me about this person she knew, or a person, a friend, or maybe a friend of a friend. And they went to go and do ayahuasca in the jungle. I believe it's in Peru. And it was all sorted. They were going to go do the ayahuasca ritual. It seemed like it was going to be your standard ayahuasca procedure. And actually, they ended up getting coerced by, these malevolent sorcerers, or, twisted shamans. And they had an ayahuasca brew that had Brugmansia or Datura in it, and they ended up having an extremely mental experience of fighting demons running through the jungle. Basically, almost died. Not only were they at risk of giving themselves PTSD and some form of possession from these demons, or whatever you want to call it, but they were also at risk of all of the dangers of the jungle, the parasites, the vicious animals. It was honestly a wonder that they survived at all. Thankfully, they lived to tell the tale and warn people of these pretty messed up shamans who try to, I guess they get some form of deranged pleasure from coercing people into taking these evil ayahuasca brews. The species that are typically used for these purposes include Brugmansia salviolens, and Brugmansia arborea, among others. So there's so many different types of Brugmansia to be found. Well, we learnt a lot today, didn't we? And we also had one of the most in-depth, disturbing Brugmansia trips. Is this the most disturbing Brugmansia trip ever written? Or are there more out there that I've not found yet? So, for me, I'd say this is probably the most disturbing, just because of how long it went on for, and how many different hallucinatory states they were in. Like, in the moment, it's probably like not disturbing massively. You're just having a phone call with your mate, but imagine actually experiencing that yourself. And it's just, for me, that's the most disturbing thing, is actually experiencing that and having your reality shattered. And maybe the most disturbing thing about it is not in the moment, because you're so delirious that you believe it, but the days after, when you've got to reflect on the experience and realise, holy fuck, I've just basically broken my entire perception of what is possible via the mind. The brain and the mind and consciousness are endlessly fascinating in both the positive, the negative, and all of the experiences in between. So yep, what did you guys think of this one? And I'll see you on the other side.